Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this panel discussion on protecting transportation infrastructure from cyber threats. Just going to give everyone a couple of minutes to filter in from the waiting room. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. In the meantime, just a few housekeeping items so that we're all on the straight and narrow. This panel is being recorded and will be shared with you afterwards. So don't worry too much if you are not taking notes. We will be distributing this afterwards. Throughout the session, you can ask questions. It's in the dedicated Zoom Q&A box at the bottom of this window. So please feel free to ask your questions throughout the webinar. And the session part of the Q&A will be held at the end. So please submit your questions. They will be answered at the end. And if we do run out of time, the guys will be able to follow up with you with your questions if we don't get around to answering them. Give it a couple more minutes. I see people joining, which is great. Okay, just because we're on a time schedule, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our wonderful speakers for today. We have Andrew Nix, Operational Technology and Cybersecurity Consulting Manager for Schneider Electric. Hi, Andrew. Good morning. Phil Page from Nozomi Networks. He's our Director of Technology Alliances. And we have Cezary Zielinski, OT Solutions Architect at Fortinet. Good afternoon, Cezary.
Good afternoon.
Fabulous. Well, I see a healthy number of attendees in the participation box, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining, everyone. It's great to have a great mix of speakers today. It's great to see you all. And Andrew, no worries about the power. Okay, if you dip out, we know where you've gone.
Thank you. That's life around a hurricane, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, we're just glad you could be here. Question for you all. How do your companies partner together? Could you describe your partnership for the audience so we know how we'll work together? I'm going to throw it over to you first, Andrew.
Sure, absolutely. So, a little bit of background. I think this is three organizations with three very cool and unique sets of skills. Schneider Electric, of course, being known for our buildings and power and control systems, but out of necessity, and securing those networks that we engage in when we design, deploy, and manage those systems, we built a cybersecurity services organization. And over the last 15 years, we've been guiding customers, figuring out what's the best way to keep those safe. And we've really honed in on our relationships with the best of the best, the organizations that are most on top of cybersecurity in the OT space. And we found that Nozomi and Fortinet are absolute gold class leaders when it comes to their fields. And as such, we've built a strong skill set around designing, implementing, and operationalizing and managing their technologies for our customers.
Thanks, Andrew. Phil, throwing it over to you.
Yeah, so I've been working with both Schneider and Fortinet for almost 7 years now. Schneider was one of the very first OEM partners that we collaborated with here at Nozomi, at least since I've been on board. And then Fortinet was one of our very early technology partners. And so from the Fortinet side, and Cezary will talk about this a little bit as well, we integrate with a pretty broad swath of Fortinet's technology stack. Everything from their firewalls to their switches to their FortiSIM, FortiSOAR products, and a little bit more there. We have plenty of great webinars that we've done together to explore that further. So I'll be brief on that today. But then also with Schneider, as Andrew alluded to, we have a very long-standing partnership to secure a very diverse customer base, initially mostly process automation oriented, so things like oil and gas. But in recent years, we've expanded to a number of verticals, including the one that we're going to really focus on today, which is transportation.
Fabulous. Thanks, Phil. Cezary, last but not least.
Yeah, so just on top of that, what was mentioned by Phil and Andrew, I would like to emphasize that we are working very closely together. We are sharing a lot of engineering expertise between our teams, not only from the technology perspective, which is still the core. With reference what Phil said, our Fortinet security fabric, which is very, very natively, let's say, integrated with the, for example, Nozomi solutions. We are trying to integrate our technology, but we are also trying to integrate, let's say, our whole project lifecycle approach. So this is also very, very important. And I think, yeah, from the from the customer perspective, that's crucial, because at the end of the day, we can provide fully integrated cybersecurity solution. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We're going to get started and dive into today's topic, the transportation industry. I think Phil briefly touched upon it in the introduction to the partnership. We know that the transportation systems like railway networks and airports rely on a sophisticated IT, OT, and IoT system. What are the most significant cybersecurity threats this industry is currently facing? Cesare, let's start off with you.
All right. So first of all, we all know that, we all see that, you know, threat landscape is still evolving in every industry sector, and according to our threat intelligence data and also knowledge data that we are sharing, for example, with Nozomi and Schneider, and also other companies, we see that the main cyber threats are still ransomware, data-related threats, malwares, but ransomware attacks are the most prevalent, let's say, in the transport sector. In terms of threat actors and motivations, in most cases we talk about cyber criminals. So the motivation behind those attacks is primarily financial gain. Usually attacks are considered opportunistic, because we have not observed known threat actor groups targeting the transport sector exclusively. Majority of attacks, quite similar to other industry sectors, target IT systems, so basically enterprise IT systems. And of course, from the history, we see that it can have big impact on the operational environment. And also what I would like to emphasize and talk is, we see, of course, ongoing digital transformation in the transport sector and increased connectivity between IT, cloud, and OT systems. And the last topic that I would like to just throw, and that is also crucial nowadays, Russia and Ukraine situation, which has a big impact on the, let's say, global cyber threat landscape.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cesare. Andrew, throwing it over to you.
Absolutely. So first of all, I think Cesare is spot on. That is absolutely, I think mission critical when it comes to, the threat landscape of transportation. And I'll add one more factor into that we've seen lately, which frankly spans beyond just one industry, but I think has a particular impact in transportation, and that's actually the workforce availability. Because interestingly, if you take a look at, the adversaries that we're up against, that's a full-time committed industry. You can actually study it. You can see their activity, and when they take weekends, when they take holidays. They're analyzing and looking at industries like transportation and seeing what are your workforce weaknesses. When do you take shift changes? When is there chaos in your environment? And trying to take advantage of that. And so our workforce has to be up to snuff and ready to take that on, knowing what they're up against. Those adversaries are, full-time committed to trying to either cause chaos or get a financial return, whatever their motivation is. On the other hand, transportation industry, workforce is focused on other things, on whatever their role is. And so there's a bit of cybersecurity that has to be in everybody's mind. So, IT and OT convergence has been a buzzword for the last decade. We all know that, but now it's actually happening, and the businesses want OT to be connected. They want it to be secured. But really the number of people who know how to do that and know the intimate details of OT protocols like Modbus and BACnet, and know those unique cybersecurity needs for OT, they can be hard to find and hard to hire and retain, especially with the diversified networks and diversified landscape of some of the transportation industry. And that's one of the reasons why we focus so heavily on those skill sets throughout our engineering and managed services programs to provide those to customers. But realistically, this is going to be a continuing challenge as, management of OT devices, it's kind of folded into IT, and, some of the, network landscape changes and grows. So the workforce does need to be a focus, especially on their mentality around cybersecurity, their knowledge of their space and how they contribute in any role to a secure environment.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. Phil?
Yeah, one thing I think is kind of unique to transportation is that in many cases, you've got a pretty diverse technology stack, right? So if I take a look at maybe mass transit, you've got things like ticket machines, you've got, things like switching and signaling systems, which have a physical presence. You've also got building management systems for, the stations as well as other areas. And some of that, of course, is I'd say neglected to a degree, right? Maybe you've let your maintenance contract lapse with the vendors that are maintaining these. In other cases, it's just exposed, and I look at like rail switching boxes. Sometimes you can just go out to the railroad tracks and you can actually see the box there. Doesn't take much probably to jimmy it open. So I think the mixture of cyber as well as even cyber physical sabotage is quite high. And we saw an incident, I think a year or two ago in Germany, where somebody had sabotaged the cables for the signaling systems. And so it's not hard to imagine where somebody could do physical sabotage act combined with a more conventional cyber attack by accessing some of those systems that are out there in non-physically secured or limited physical security areas. So I think that's one of the interesting things that I find specifically with the transportation sector.
Perfect. Thanks, Phil. Now for the really interesting part. The team has prepared a slide for you guys today where we're going to share a joint customer success story. Let me just flick the slide along here so you can see. Can the team on the call here highlight the benefits of the collaboration between you all when it comes to the cybersecurity efforts and helping this customer specifically address their security challenges? Andrew, I want to start off with you for this one.
Sorry, double muted. I'll
good.
keep my section on this a little bit brief because I think we were able to help tie it together from a from kind of an engineering consultative standpoint, but it's really the cool technology and the platform that really make this happen too. So I want to give more time to my colleagues to talk about that. But in this case, and of course, we're a little bit secretive here because all of our work is done under NDA, and we would do the same for any customer. We want them to be secure. But this was a particular environment where there was definitely a need for this this diversified, dispersed landscape, all sorts of different equipment that's out in the field, all sorts of different age and protocols. And the knowledge around it was a little bit, segmented, piecemealed into particular experts, but not necessarily documented everywhere. And so we had an opportunity to work together with Nozomi and with Fortinet to really solve some of those problems. And from a Schneider standpoint, provide the engineering manpower, the expertise across industry, across the globe to bring all that together and make sure that everything was implemented, operationalized, reliable, dependable, and accurate so that the customer could really take that design and start working with it immediately. Use that to know what to do. Just, disperse actions out in the field to get some real results from the technology, not just use it as, something cool to show off internally. So really interesting use case here around that OT security and integration of technologies together to solve a wider problem and make the tools that they already own more effective by providing them data from the power of Nozomi and Fortinet's platforms. So I'll pause there and let my colleagues pick up and fill in some gaps.
Phil?
Yeah, so this one was pretty interesting because we'd already collaborated with one of the entities in this public transit authority. It's a very large city, I can say that much. And they've got a mixture of kind of some light rail, commuter trains, and then also a metro system. And so we'd already had some success there. And one thing that was beneficial was, of course, having that as a referenceable account together. We went, I think, with Fortinet in that one as well. Schneider, though, was very well connected within this account. They'd already been working with this customer for a while, doing some integrations, I believe, on the building management systems, right? So that, again, I mentioned earlier, the stations, of course, have their own heating as well as cooling systems. But then also this project, it's going to have multiple different phases because when we talk about mass transit and metro systems specifically, they've got a lot of different equipment, right? They've got power distribution, so they do have some substations and transformers they need to secure because their trains are powered through electric power, and they kind of own that footprint. They've also got the train side, which we haven't really looked at yet, but that's, I think, further down the line. And then also things like the station side systems. That would include everything from, the ticketing systems to the turnstiles, CCTV cameras. So all that kind of more IoT oriented stuff is also going to fall under this footprint. The great benefit that Nozomi and Fortinet were able to bring is that we already work with all these systems and these kinds of systems in other environments, sometimes individually. So we've collaborated in a number of power utility customers, right, for the substation and power delivery aspect. But then also the IoT side is pretty fascinating because we've been seeing more interest from things like retail operators recently. And so point of sale systems, very similar to those automated ticketing systems, and the turnstiles as well, kind of similar to what we've seen before in airports. We work in airports and other types of things like ship ports and types of systems that maybe have automated scanning for security or also just for access control. And so this was a great customer because it brought all of this together, right? And so it was a great opportunity for the Schneider team to also be able to work in these different verticals, having more traditionally been focused on the building management system aspect. They were able to also apply the same expertise during the solutions architecture phase together with us and Fortinet toward these other systems that were included in the first phase of this project. Now, as I mentioned, of course, there is multiple different phases we're going to do with this. So we just started on the first phase, and the subsequent phases will include the other systems within this customer.
Excellent. Thank you, Phil. And Cesare?
Yeah, so just to add on top of that, I think that one of the most important thing from the customer perspective regarding this project is that having such a company like Schneider Electric that is capable and have competency to at the end of the day to bring the holistic solution, okay? Because we all know how OT projects, how industrial control systems projects are complex. And on top of that, when we talk about cybersecurity, usually you need to have a very, very strong expertise and deep understanding of those systems to deploy cybersecurity solutions. So it's a great story. And from our side, what I can just add that Fortinet offers a platform-based approach to cybersecurity through integration of our products in a unified portfolio. So actually, that is the main philosophy behind our products. Okay, so we want to provide a holistic approach to cybersecurity. So, for example, in this case, we touched the basic cybersecurity measure like network segmentation, network microsegmentation, and also central management, which is also crucial nowadays, because at the end of the day, we want to with reference what Andrew said about the resources. Okay, nowadays we have limited resources. We need to somehow optimize the time necessary to manage all kind of cybersecurity solutions. So I think this is the big added value to have a, let's say, a platform-based approach to cybersecurity. And yeah, it was a big success.
Sophie, I'd just like to highlight, one thing for anyone who's listening and thinking, well, I need to bolster my cybersecurity. I'm looking at different things and trying to figure out how to get that done, but there's so many different things out there. How do I even figure it out? I would just say, let this, this particular, customer, I think, had some very real, challenges that apply to a lot of us. But use this as more of a thought of, I need to use my vendors to my advantage, right? So folks that are already in my facilities, they know me, they know what we're doing, they know the equipment that's out there. Bring them together, get them in a room, and let them all talk to each other and figure out solutions for you. I think, in this case, this was a customer who were able to do that really proactively and use the relationships that we had to really highlight, hey, I think we can solve some really, systematic problems here. But you can be proactive about that and, really lay out, hey, here are my goals. This is what I want to do from a cyber standpoint, from a modernization standpoint. Then bring your vendors together and say, give me some results, show me what to do. And that gives us the opportunity to do things like this, where we can, pull together, ourselves and Nozomi and Fortinet and others and find, answers to your questions. And it may not be the perfect one that you want to go with. Maybe you want to tweak it or add some or change something. Give us that input. But at least it gives you a vision of what can be done, and how the folks that are already providing into your environment, that know it well, that don't have to take that time to learn it, can help further.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. Phil, Cesare, is there anything else you'd like to add to that before we move on to the next point?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Brilliant. That story sounds like a great effort of collaboration and time spent with great knowledge experts. So thank you for sharing. What are recent changes in regulations that have impacted your approach to cybersecurity and transportation? Phil, I think we should start off with you for this one.
Yes, there's quite a bit, and depending upon which region or which country you're in, of course, you're going to be impacted differently. Here in Europe, obviously, NIS2 really is the big kind of topic of the day. Most of our customers that are concerned with this maybe are in critical manufacturing or oil and gas, but transportation is very clearly spelled out as one of the sectors that is, falling under this NIS2 directive. And so I think for many of our transit customers that we've been dealing with, but I'd say even broader airports, shipping, things like ports, things of that nature, the main driver is to be compliant with NIS2. NIS2 is interesting because it's somewhat broad and it's not very prescriptive, but at the same time, it is fairly specific in the dimensions that it wants you to cover when it comes to cybersecurity. In a way, it's somewhat similar to some other directives we've seen. So in Australia, for example, they have a directive that was passed in 2018 that sort of codified some of the critical infrastructure cybersecurity laws, and then I think they modified it a few years later to include things like risk management, right, processes, and what have you. And so NIS2 kind of takes it at a high level. Now, of course, in the United States, there's a couple different regulations depending upon who you're working with. There was an executive order that was issued a few years back that really did mandate, of course, very strict federal oversight and guidance, as put forth by DHS for the transportation sector, including other different sectors that will be covered under CISA's mandate. But then the challenge becomes, and I'll lead on my colleagues here from Fortinet as well as Schneider to talk about implementing a good framework that brings you into compliance with that, right? Because we have the compliance requirements, but then how do we actually get to the point where we're checking all the boxes there? And most of these regulations, again, they're not prescriptive when it comes to individual controls. For that, we'll lean on some of the security governance frameworks that I'm sure that Andrew and Cesare will cover here in a second. But if you're a transit operator or some kind of transport operator, you're going to fall under these new regulations. One thing that Schneider especially can do, but also, of course, Nozomi and Fortinet working together, is help you chart a path from, if you're just getting started, right, to how can you not only become compliant, but also really exceed your goals for your organizational goals for cybersecurity by implementing some of these frameworks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Phil. Andrew, do we want to jump to you next, or Cesare? I see you just unmuted yourself.
Yeah. So just on top of what Phil mentioned, of course nowadays we see more and more standards, regulations, good practices, these kind of things. In terms of our Europe regulations, of course, NIS2 is the most important nowadays. Transportation is one of the essential entity in terms of NIS2. So basically, NIS2 considers the need for increased threat information sharing, while also focusing on cyber risk management proactively, addressing the evolving cyber threat landscape, what I mentioned previously. And from our perspective, again, we are trying to have platform-based approach, and let's say have a holistic approach to the cybersecurity measures implementations. So at the end of the day, we are able to address several elements of cyber risk management and incident response capabilities required by NIS2, for example. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cesare. Andrew?
Absolutely. So on top of that, I think that one of the things that I look at from a Schneider perspective is that we are very fortunate in our organization to have a very strong product security office as well. And they are charged with ensuring that everything that we make, cyber products and our building management, power systems, and control products, all have cybersecurity built in. And the reason I say that is that's becoming more and more important for you as operators, as facility owners, to challenge your vendors and make sure that they're doing what they need to do to keep their products secure as these new guidelines come out, whether they're aligned to IEC 62443, whether they are working on compliance with new NIST regulations, whether you're working on NIST 2.0, whether you're working on TSA guidelines. All of those things are important for you to be able to challenge your vendors and make sure that they're on top of it. Does what they're doing align with your organization's goals? Hold them responsible for the security of the things that you're buying from them. Then on top of that, they can't prepare for what's in your actual network. So we have to make sure that your network is secure as well. And the technology that you're using, like Nozomi, like Fortinet, to get them, get that network safe, let the packets flow securely in each direction, is secure as well. I will say though, NIST 2.0 is something that comes to mind globally, of course, predominantly in Europe, but I think a lot of organizations are preparing for that to be a global thing, globally adopted. So we know that's going to expand. So getting ahead of that's going to be really important. And generally, we're seeing cybersecurity become more of a highlighted concern just at all levels in an organization. So folks are starting to kind of more understand their role. I talked about workforce earlier. As it comes to kind of securing the company's assets, its technology, its IP, and that's helped a lot to make sure that those steps are being taken, that are holding people accountable, bringing people together to solve problems. And so I just remind you that, of course, there's a lot of technology that can really solve major problems and take the burden off of the workforce and be much more intense analysis on network and traffic and assets than any human ever physically could. But don't forget about the human element, because it only takes one human mistake to get around all of that sometimes, and keeping that mindset in place goes a long way.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you to our panelists for the invaluable feedback of all the questions that they've answered today. We're almost at the end of our time, so we're just going to quickly jump to the Q&A. And we'll open it up to the Q&A box that has been very busy during the past 30 minutes. First question from the box, and I open this up to all of you. Can you share any best practices or lessons learned from this collaborative effort that could benefit other customers in the industry? I leave it to you guys to decide who jumps in there.
Maybe Andrew, that might be a good one for you to take.
Sure. So I'll share one that I think, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think it is very important. One of the things that I've seen in all of our collaborations, every project that we've done with Nozomi and Fortinet, is just the value of again, bringing folks together. And so from an asset owner, facility owner perspective, please understand that it's okay to ask for help. Nobody expects you to do this alone, to know everything. It's impossible. There's too much to analyze, too much to do, too much knowledge to have. These are really powerful technologies, and it's important to make sure that they are well understood. They're used to their best advantage. You're using the security that comes built into products that you're already deploying in other areas as well. So ask for help. Bring folks together. Let your vendors collaborate and work for you, so that you can get more out of the technology that you have, and make sure that as you make plans to expand, to grow, to modernize, to develop, whatever it may be, that you have the thoughts in mind already of how that can be done most effectively. So it's not figured out later on at the cost of a consultancy or something like that. So do ask for help. there are many managed services. We offer one as well to help, to help make sure that these technologies are overseen correctly, that you're getting the right insights, and that your strategy aligns with what your peers in the industry are doing and what others in other industries are doing. Because at the end of the day, adversaries aren't necessarily just targeting you. They're just looking for open issues, a misconfigured, PLC or switch or what have you, that'll let them get in and cause damage. They may not know who you are. So being up to par against your neighbors is very important. So do ask for help. Let your vendors work with you.
Phil, Cesar, is there anything you want to jump in there and add to before I move on to the next question?
I think it's pretty comprehensive. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Next question. IoT and transportation, especially in this context of building automation systems and CCTV cameras, has revolutionized the industry, but also raised significant cybersecurity concerns. How do your companies help address these new security challenges?
I guess I can jump in there.
Sure.
So one area of emphasis the Nozomi's really had recently around IoT, there's a big push for asset identification because with more conventional OT systems, we see that there's a little more awareness among the the employees of the company, whether they're engineering folks or whether they're more on the IT side, as to what types of systems they already have. They may know generally they have a Schneider system, right? They may have a Siemens system. But the problem is that when somebody builds like a station, for example, or even an airport doing renovations, you're probably going to bring in a different party to do that IoT specific piece. In fact, you may have different companies providing technologies for each of them. And so they may establish the entire system, whether it's going to be your your safety scanners, whether it's going to be your CCTV cameras, your fire suppression systems. And then unlike a more conventional OT system that may be monitored full time by a site engineer, you're not typically going to be looking at those all day, every day, right? So they're kind of there running in the background, waiting for something to happen, or at the very least, they're being used by people that are not responsible for the maintenance of those systems. And so where Nozomi has identified a major capability gap is the asset management and asset lifecycle management of these systems, right? It's finding out where assets might be end of life, end of sale, where there's vulnerabilities because they haven't been patched, and then providing feedback to partners like Schneider that may have a managed service to do this, or again to the customers directly to help triage and then come in and respond to that. Of course, the threat detection piece is also important with that, but I think that the major vulnerability there is the vulnerability associated with these devices if they're not properly maintained, and with the consolidation and everything that happens in this industry, it can be hard sometimes to maintain consistency with keeping those systems up to date.
Yeah, so just a few words from my side. In terms of IoT systems, IIoT systems, of course, we see and we will see more and more these kind of systems, smart systems also in the OT space. Frankly speaking, usually we are not so happy about it because we are opening the doors. Of course, it is not something new that those devices usually has a lot of vulnerabilities. But at the end of the day, what I would like to say that what Phil said, the visibility detection is crucial, and also from our perspective, more from the networking and security perspective, it's crucial to have a strong network segmentation / micro segmentation. So usually you need to put those devices to for example, to the dedicated segment of the network, in order to fully control the network traffic between those devices and the rest of the infrastructure.
So I think y'all covered it extremely well. The only other thing that I'll add is in those devices, be it a camera or an access control or whatever it is, using technology like Nozomi and Fortinet to get the asset visibility and the level of detail about it, like its firmware version installed, its patching status. That's mission critical, right? We actually really recommend that to every single one of our customers as a way to make sure that they have a holistic view of everything that's out there and what needs to be actioned on it to keep it secure, and the prioritization of doing that. and then actually do it. And I know that comes back to my workforce comment, but issuing that action out to make sure that it's done, it's prioritized, it's complete. That becomes a really big point once you've got the visibility. So, I think Philip's spot on with his comments on asset inventory. That is huge. We hear it from almost every major customer that we have. Then once you have that information, making sure that you're actioning on it and taking the threats and vulnerabilities that it raises with a high level of importance is the critical next step. Take advantage also of the technologies that are built into those devices to secure them. From a Schneider standpoint, I know we do a huge amount of R&D into device security built in by default. And then are surprised sometimes to see those features not actually being used in the field. So do activate them and make that a part of the setup and configuration process so that they're deployed securely as well, just adding that defense in depth layer.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Last but not least, our final question from the chat, and those of you who had questions that we haven't managed to answer, the team will follow up. Philip brought up a very large concern of mine, namely wayside sites with physical access directly into tier 0 networks. These sites number in the tens of thousands. We're working on TSA 1580 regulations, as well as our own thoughts on protecting these. But what specific measures would you recommend to secure sites like this? A bit of a mouthful, so if you need me to repeat anything, let me know.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough, right? There's not the problem is that when you've got that many sites, you're also kind of dealing with a cost factor where it's not very cost effective to go installing robust physical security systems. I think there's two ways you can do this. Number one is network access control, right? So by enforcing who has access to those devices very strictly. That's not a magic bullet, right? Because again, there's ways to bypass that, especially if they have physical access to the device. But it is a way to keep, the more conventional kind of script kiddies out of it. The second way, I think, is through monitoring. And I'm not just saying that because I work at Nozomi, but if you have a large dispersed, infrastructure, then monitoring that in some way, whether it's going to be through maybe like a host-based IDS or some more network solution, at least you'll know there's a problem, and then you can have a field service technician, go respond to it. The challenge becomes if somebody's access to that system and then is able to go through a backdoor to get into the rest of your network. We have seen this with some of our customers where people have been able to get access to power utility networks by exploiting, say, poorly enforced network access control and monitoring within substations they've gained physical access to. So that'd be the two, I think, most cost-effective ways, because those solutions can largely be consolidated. Building really robust physical enclosures for dispersed systems, I mean, that can be very expensive, right? Especially if the system's already there in the field. Maybe as they're replaced and life cycled, you could find a way to make that work. But yeah.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
I think if I could add to that just quickly, TSA 1580 has four, if I remember correctly, four specific kind of items, actions for you to take at a higher level. Right, and that's segmentation, access controls, continuous monitoring, and patch your stuff. Right, easier said than done in a vastly distributed network with more access than others. But this is one of those cases where it's going to be a bit of maybe an investigation and a balance, right, of being able to achieve that, but doing it in a way that's cost effective. I do think that in similar cases, especially in like the midstream pipeline aspect, where it's different, but the same, a distributed network with lower level access, all across, a long network. Technologies like Nozomi can really make a difference in being able to kind of capture some of those together, from, giving you that visibility to patches and prioritization, to helping with that continuous monitoring, because I think that's going to be really important here in really being able to see when there's threats and what's happening, so it can be actioned very quickly as you work on a longer term plan to how to cost effectively do more types of segmentation, even if it's virtual segmentation, which again the technology can help with, and then again access control. So it is going to be, I think, a real kind of thought leadership challenge to address in that scope. But those 4 actions, those 4 items, I think are achievable in over time as you build a roadmap to building that. If you'd like to kind of discuss that with some of the experts that at least from our engineering, our team that have done that in different industries kind of similar, I'm happy to set up that conversation so you can get a deep dive into what their real world thoughts are.
Brilliant. Thank you all. With that, we'll have to stop there. Any questions that weren't answered, we will follow up with you individually after the webinar has come to an end. What I will do on the screen right now is show you some additional resources that we have surrounding some of the topics that we discussed today, and some of them that you will receive, as well as the recording of the panel after this webinar. I'd like to thank all of the panelists, Phil, Cesare, Andrew, for your time, and as well as our partners, Schneider Electric and Fortinet, for joining us today. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you for staying with us. I know we ran over, but hopefully you will gain some super valuable insights. Thank you all again, and look forward to seeing you soon.